I welcome all our participants and viewers to this session. Um, my name is Moses Owing, and I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Multilateral Affairs. Again, I welcome you to the session. Maybe before I introduce our speakers, I would like to say something small about the session. As you are aware and as you have been attending many sessions, democratic democracy is being eroded by authoritarian regimes and rulers who has increasingly been shutting down internet and undermining basic rights and freedoms of citizens and individuals. Several reasons have been advanced by these regimes and authorities. I think for some of you have been following the state of internet shutdown from Access Now and other actors. In 2018, I think 2019, last year alone, 33 countries shut down its internet. In Africa, we have seen Algeria, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, countries like Eritrea and Gabon shutting down its internet. So the main purpose of today's uh, discussion, basically, for purpose of this session is for us to interrogate some of the reasons advanced by these authorities, by these regimes, because there are so many reasons that they bring forward. Today, we want to discuss those reasons advanced by the authorities for shutting down the internet. And the panel that we have here has been working in this area for quite some time. Some of them are coming from countries where internet has been shut down either once or twice or more than that. So they bring in real life experience. We have uh, uh, in the room, in the panel of speakers, some people who have been working or with Access Now under the Keep It On program to keep it on. Yes, a program that seeks to ensure that democracy is not eroded by regimes shutting down its internet. So I would like to welcome you again, and before that, I introduce the speakers that I have today. Um, with us in the room, you can see them is Sandra. Sandra Cheng is a fellow that is currently researching with the Global Network Initiative, but also working as a program officer at the Women of Uganda Network. Our research seeks to explore the implications of internet shutdown for women and minority groups in Uganda. So we shall be hearing from Sandra at some point in time. Then we have Chris. Chris is an information control fellow at the Open Technology Fund, and he brings in diverse experiences in the field, in the subject area. And we'll also be looking to hear from Chris and his perspective. And then, of course, we have Felicia Antonio. Felicia is the Keep It On campaign lead at Access Now. She has been at the forefront of, advocacy around or against internet shutdown, and she brings in very rich experiences. So we'll also be looking forward to hearing from Felicia. And then we have Sheila Shekanabo. Sheila is a research associate at the Center for Multilateral Affairs. Sheila brings in also a lot of experiences. Uganda, as you will hear from her, Uganda has ever shut down its internet, I think, more than once or twice. So she will be speaking to us and bringing to us those real life experiences. So those are our panel of speakers. I encourage you during the course of the discussion, if you have questions, to post it in the chat, and our speakers should be able to see it and will be able to respond to it or comment or whatever you want to share with us. But also, of course, we will also be happy to hear from your various perspectives, your experiences, which again you can also be posting on the chat so that we will follow the discussion. So to quickly kickstart this discussion, I would like to first bring on board Felicia. Felicia, you have been working as a campaign lead of the Keep It On at Access Now, but we would like you to give us first the context. Like when we talk about internet shutdown, I think we need to understand that basic, definition. What is internet shutdown? What forms does it take, and even manifest, if we are to use that. Uh, you can talk about also the state of internet, shutdown in Africa, but also, even in Asia, even in, from the broader context, so that we have an understanding of generally what we are talking about before we can proceed to now understand some of the reasons and the arguments that are, brought forward by uh, authoritarian regimes or rulers, or however, whichever language you want to call it, in trying to justify internet shutdown. So, Felicia, you are most welcome.
Thank you very much, Moses, for inviting the Keep It On campaign to speak on issues of internet shutdowns. And as some of you may know, and those of you who might have heard Keep It On for the first time on this around RightsCon, Keep It On is a global campaign that unites over 220 organizations working to end internet shutdowns around the world. And hello.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Can hear you.
Working to end internet shutdowns around the world. And we do this in using diverse strategies. We use litigation, and we recently saw two wins in 2020, where the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice ruled that internet shutdowns in Togo were illegal. And then also we've seen another win in Indonesia, where the Jakarta court also ruled that internet shutdowns that were used in ordered by the government in 2019 are also were also illegal. And so we use diverse strategies. And so let me just quickly let our audience know exactly what we mean when we say internet shutdowns. An internet shutdown happens when someone, and it's usually a government, intentionally disrupts the internet or other mobile apps to ensure that people are not able to say or do what they want to do. So it's mainly to control what people say or do, and it's usually to stifle criticism. And then also sometimes you hear internet blackouts or kill switches. It's the same as internet shutdowns. But then a more technical definition of an internet shutdown developed by experts and the Keep It On coalition members were also part of this process, defines an internet shutdown as an intentional disruption of the internet and electronic communication, rendering them inaccessible and or effectively unusable for a specific population or within a specific location, often to exert control over flow of information. So you see that it is an intentional measure to stifle dissent, to silence critics. And we've seen internet shutdowns in both democratic and undemocratic governments or countries. And so what we've seen is that a government can decide to completely shut down the internet, that is, traffic is zero, or shut down social media platforms like WhatsApp, Facebook, and Twitter. And then also, some governments tend to slow down the internet speed to, let's say, 2G, making it really difficult to use it for anything. And this is when you see you are able to, let's say, go on Facebook, but you're not able to see images. on the Facebook platform. And so we've seen the use of internet shutdowns or social media blackouts at national levels. And in Africa, like to come to Africa, we've seen in 2019, Liberia shut down social media platforms during protests. And funny enough, we just put together a statement expressing concern that we've received reports from our partners in Zimbabwe that the government intends to shut down the internet tomorrow ahead of during planned protests. And this is really worrying. And once these rumors start coming out up and we don't act, you tend to see that they happen. And so we are really hoping that the government of Zimbabwe would listen to our calls and keep the internet on during the protest and thereafter. Also, we've seen internet shutdowns in Togo during the elections in February this year. Burundi shut down the internet, shut down social media platforms during elections as well. In May, Guinea shut down the internet in March during legislative elections. And then when you go out, we know of ongoing internet shutdowns from 2019 that are still happening in the Cox's Bazar refugee camp in Bangladesh, and then also in India's Jammu and Kashmir regions, as well as Pakistan, where this internet shutdown actually started in 2016 and is still ongoing. And then we have the Shine and Rakhine states in Myanmar. And so our 2019 reports, we noted that internet shutdowns were lasting longer, they were targeting vulnerable groups, and then they were affecting more and more people. And this is to say that when you look at the internet shutdowns in Bangladesh, for instance, in the Cox's Bazar region, this is targeting the over 900,000 refugees, Rohingya refugees that are currently sheltering there. And then also, we've seen governments use internet shutdowns as a first step in solving conflicts. And that is why in the tribal regions of Pakistan, the internet is still shut down. And we've also seen Ethiopia shut down the internet just recently following protests against the killing of Oromo musician and social activist Hachalu Hundisa. So these are some of the shutdowns that are ongoing and some of the shutdowns that we have seen. And whilst as the conversation unfolds, I'm happy to speak on more of the issues that we are seeing on at the global level. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Felicia, for unraveling that for us. Before I come back to you, Felicia, maybe let me bring Chris. Chris, within the context of your region and the work that you do, is there anything you want to add on what Felicia has said? What has been the experiences from your side? What can you share with the participants?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Moses, and thanks, Felicia, for your a great introduction. So to briefly introduce myself, I'm a OTF, Open Technology Fund Fellow now, working primarily on the politics behind India's internet shutdowns. So I'm not sure to what extent the audience is aware of where around the world the internet shutdowns take place, but actually last year in 2019, more than half of the internet shutdowns worldwide took place in India. And this might seem at first kind of a paradox because at least in name, India is a democracy. So my project really questions like, what explains this staggering number of internet shutdowns in India, and how can we make sense of it? And I think Felicia already touched upon like some of the most frequent given explanations for why shutdowns happen around the world. And basically, the most common explanations that you hear is to prevent protests, basically, to prevent strategic mobilization. The second is, I think, to cover up, to hide certain human rights abuses or electoral malpractices. Especially in Africa, of course, there are many shutdowns during elections. And the third one, I would say, the third explanation that is often given on internet shutdowns is, I think, the punishing or disciplining of marginalized groups in society that are somehow in struggle with the central government, and that fight for wider, greater political recognition, greater autonomy. You see that in Myanmar, you see that in Balochistan, in Pakistan, in Cameroon, for instance. So these are roughly three explanations that are often given for internet shutdowns. And what kind of binds them together, I think, is that they are very politically repressive in nature. And when we look at India, you see that this also happens. Some shutdowns are clearly very repressive in nature. So some clearly have the intent to suppress political protest. And in Kashmir, you see almost exactly the same as what is happening outside elsewhere in the world, where you see that a marginalized group of people that strives for more autonomy and independence is repressed. And the shutdown serves as an extra tool to do that. But in India, this is not, as far as I'm concerned, the complete story. Some shutdowns are not clearly issued to repress political challengers. There are shutdowns happening in India where you have a state government that even supports a protest for weeks, and that you still have a shutdown that takes place, sometimes very briefly, sometimes in a very specific area where there are some law and order issues. So to say that all shutdowns in India are meant to politically repress would be an oversimplification. But some definitely are. Let me be very clear on that. And there's very little transparency in terms of how they are issued, and not a good review process afterwards. There's one, so that's one point I'd like to make, that you can't say that all shutdowns in India are clearly meant to politically repress political challengers. And the second point that I'd like to make about the shutdowns in India, if I may, is that oftentimes when you read about internet shutdowns in India, it is presented as a very top-down, centrally coordinated kind of tool by the government, in this case Narendra Modi's Hindu nationalist government, that kind of issues a shutdown to suppress his political opponents. For instance, a protest, and Modi says, let's do an internet shutdown. In India, it's not really the case. It's more a consequence of India's federalism, where India has 29 states. So they have the responsibility to maintain law and order, and they're responsible for internal security. So what you see, the bureaucrats and the authorized officials that issue internet shutdowns are mostly answering to their state governments rather than to the central government in Delhi. So if we want to understand like the dynamics that have led to all these shutdowns in India, we'd better look at what is happening in specific states rather than at the central level. So this is, I think, two important points that I'd like to make about the shutdowns in India.
Thank you very much, Chris, for giving us that context from that side of the region. Actually, I wanted to ask both you and Felicia about some of these reasons, of the so-called justifications that governments give, or authorities give, for shutting down internet. But you note that one of the most common, phrases that they use is national security interests. And I think you explained some of the reasons that you have already highlighted. But why do you think governments and authorities love to use the term national security so much? Why do they think that whenever they use the term national security, it gives a very high, precedent for them to act as leaders to shut down internet. And Felicia can come on board as well.
I think it's just their way of justifying the shutdown, because when they mention national security, it's supposed to be the topmost priority. And so once it's about national security, then they are justified in shutting down the internet. But internet shutdowns go beyond national security, and we've seen shutdowns that are happening in countries where there are protests, and even with the shutdown, the citizens still continue to protest and demand for justice, or demand for whatever it is they are looking for from their authorities. And so when governments use internet national security as a justification, I still think it's just a way of covering up to stifle dissent and to perpetrate human rights abuses against protesters in particular. We've seen situations where the internet is shut down, and once it's restored, you hear of several reports of police brutality on protesters or dissenting voices. And so I don't think national security is a justification for internet shutdowns. And we've seen internet shutdowns affecting and disrupting all aspects of people's lives. And it's not, when you weigh the option, it's not proportionate, and it's not just necessary for a government to take down the whole internet just to restore national security. What happens to the students that rely on the internet for education? What happens to the financial sector, the banking sector? What happens to the health and emergency services? And what happens to journalists, human rights activists like you and myself that are advocating for human rights? And it just goes beyond the list. And in short, there is no justification for internet shutdowns, and they are not acceptable because they violate a wide spectrum of people's rights around the world.
Thank you. Chris, you want to say something?
Well, to the question that you raised, which is an interesting one, why the national security argument is such a popular justification for issuing internet shutdowns. I think it's because it legitimizes it in a way that which allows the authorities to not motivate their decision any further, because they can always hide behind the fact that it is a matter of national security. So in India, the officials now, according to new rules for issuing internet shutdowns, they have to justify their actions by showing kind of the material facts that have led them to believe that an internet shutdown is needed. So these are the new rules. But now, for instance, in Kashmir, the authorities can always say, well, this information we cannot give. It's completely classified. You have to do it with the term national security, because this is a military operation and so on and so forth. So, but by framing it as a national security threat or as a challenge to national security, you basically tell other people that might challenge your decision or that might question your decision for issuing an internet shutdown to basically, you'd better shut up and go somewhere else, because this is none of your concern.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chris. And we know, for example, within the East African region, Uganda is going to be going through election early next year, and campaigns and stuff like that has started. And I think also Tanzania also. So there is that growing worry that authorities might still use these same ambiguous, statements or reasons to justify shutting down internet for purposes of, their own political expedience. And I wanted to bring Sheila on board because Sheila is a researcher. I don't know if is there. Sheila, yes. Sheila has been also researching around this for the context of Uganda. As you're aware, and as you hear from her, Uganda shut down its internet before, not once, or I think twice. Sheila is going to inform us. So I wanted Sheila to talk to us, especially from the Ugandan experience, and some of the reasons that the government of Uganda or the regulator of the communication sector in Uganda advanced for justifying internet shutdown in Uganda, and of course also throwing back to you guys in your opinion, which again Chris has elaborated so eloquently, whether it is justifiable or So I will pass the mic to Sheila to speak to us. Sheila, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Yes, please proceed.
You can hear me, that's good.
Yeah.
Yes, according to research, internet shutdowns and state violences go hand in hand. And sadly, Uganda joined an alarming global trend of government-mandated shutdowns during elections. And we have seen through the explanations that my colleague Felicia has given that many African states adopted this, including Ethiopia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, and Burundi, among others. And it's very funny how Uganda was among the first African countries to enact a right to information law known as the Access to Information Act in 2005. And immediately after that, surprisingly, in the next year's 2006 elections, the UCC instructed ISPs to block access to the website of Radio Katwe for publishing, quote unquote, malicious and false information against the ruling National Resistance Movement and its presidential candidate. At this time, Ugandan authorities blocked access to the radio station and the Daily Monitor website for publishing, quote unquote, independently tallied election results. Media platforms were quickly reinstated at that time, but only after the Electoral Commission announced their official results. So following this, on April 14, 2011, the UCC instructed ISPs to temporarily block access to Facebook and Twitter for 24 hours to eliminate connecting and sharing information. The order came in the heat of opposition-led walk to work protests by Dr. Kizza Besigye over rising fuel and food prices. The reason given by the regulating committee was to prevent violence. So following after that, the next shutdown that Uganda experienced was during 2016 general elections. In 2016, we experienced two shutdowns. The first one was on February 2016 on the 18th, and it lasted for 4 days, and it ended on 21st. It was a Sunday when it. Then the second one happened on May 11th, 2016, where social media platforms, including Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, mobile money transfer services were also once again blocked. So according to UCC, blocking was carried out on orders of the Electoral Commission for security reasons. MTN Uganda confirmed that UCC directed it to block, quote unquote, social media and mobile money services due to a threat to public order and safety. So during both shutdowns in 2016, the Ugandan government cited national security, like my colleagues have explained, as an excuse for those restrictions. In addition, the UCC executive director, Godfrey Mtabazi, explained that, quote unquote, he received instructions from the Inspector General of Police, by then Kale Kaihura, to shut down social media networking sites and mobile money facilities owing to security concerns. So some of the justifications for the internet shutdowns we come across as mentioned include the 2013 Communications Act, which gives UCC broad powers and functions under Section 5 that permits the communications regulator to monitor, inspect, license, control, and regulate communication services. And at the request of the government, the UCC has most times used this section to order ISPs to block access to social media and mobile money services during the 2016 elections and the ones before, meaning the government may continue to weaponize these laws to control public debate and to silence political dissent, particularly at times of elections. So, yeah, Moses, I would like to get back to you. That's the end of my...
Okay. Thank you very much, Sheila, for that. And I think before I bring Sandra on board, this really raises something that I have been particularly interested in about the role of big companies, the role of telecom companies in most of these countries in perpetuating internet shutdowns. I understand that they operate within a certain jurisdiction of sovereign entities, and therefore they're supposed to comply to certain regulations. But I also feel that by them not standing on the side of the users or the general public and always complying to government directives and going ahead to shut down internet in itself is problematic. I don't know from the experiences of Chris and Felicia, but what would you say about the role of these internet service providers or telecom companies in effecting the directives of government and going ahead to shut down internet either holistically or partially? Chris or Felicia can start, and any of the speakers can add on.
Thank you so much, Moses. Yes, the ISPs have an important role to play in ensuring that the fight against internet shutdowns is successful. But unfortunately, because of licenses, their quest to protect the licenses provided by governments, which ties them to kind of accept conditions or orders from governments in order to operate in the country. They tend to be complicit in these internet shutdowns. And this is not to say that it's justified. I think ISPs must ensure and demand for warrants from the courts, and the courts should be independent courts explaining why it is necessary to shut down the internet at a particular time in a particular country. And I think they have an important role to play here. We've seen a situation in Sudan during the 2019 shutdown when a Sudanese lawyer sued the telecom company Zain for shutting down the internet, and access was restored to him as an individual, and subsequently the shutdown was brought to an end. And so I think in as much as the telcos and ISPs have kind of some terms and conditions to listen to the demands of their governments, they also have the right to protect and provide the necessary services that users and clients and customers have paid for. And so they shouldn't be so quick to implement internet shutdown orders from governments and just throwing away the rights of the people that they are supposed to serve. And in our campaign as the Keep It On coalition, we try to engage these ISPs because they do have an important role to play in ending internet shutdowns. And so maybe we could start thinking of how to make these ISPs kind of independent of the demands of the government, so that they are there to operate and serve the users and the people, and not turn around to serve and implement the orders of governments to violate the rights of citizens.
Thank you very much, Alicia, for that answer. I think the recommendations are very good for purposes of accountability, but also the justice and ensuring that rights of individuals are not trampled on by as a result of political expedience of authoritarian regimes or leaders or actors in government. Chris, do you want to come on board and say something?
Sure. Yeah, I agree. It's an interesting question. I'd like to make 2 points on this issue. First, I'd like to refer to an article that has been written, a scientific article in 2018, where Freiburg and Garbe, 2 authors, looked at the extent to which the ownership structure of the internet affects internet shutdowns. And these authors found that once the government completely owns the whole infrastructure, so not only the ISPs, but the whole infrastructure, including the ISPs, then in sub-Saharan Africa, an internet shutdown during elections becomes more likely. So that would say that the independence of the companies vis-a-vis the government matters for internet shutdowns, that they have some leeway then to decide maybe, well, we don't follow up on that order if the government decides to issue an internet shutdown. So that would be, well, slightly optimistic. On the other hand, in India, I see, and I think that is similar elsewhere, that I see that the companies that own the ISPs, they are not the big fans of internet shutdowns because it oftentimes costs them a lot of money. But they are like they are forced by the contract that they need to sign with the government to oblige to any order that comes from the government. So in their contracts, in their licenses, they just don't have the room to say no to a government order to issue an internet shutdown. At least that's the case in India, and I'm pretty sure that it works similarly elsewhere. And I wonder whether there's any example, and perhaps Felicia or any of the other speakers know where you see that an ISP really said no to a government order to issue an internet shutdown, and then if that is so, what the consequences of that decision were. So,
okay, yeah, thank you very much, speakers Chris and Felicia. Maybe let me bring on Sandra. I introduced Sandra earlier on. Sandra is a fellow at the Global Network Initiative. She's currently researching about the implications of internet shutdown on women and other minority groups in Uganda. And I wanted Sandra to highlight some of our research work, but also explain to us what has prompted us, her to undertake that research. And I know that women suffer disproportionately compared to their male counterparts because of so many unique barriers that affect them as women. I know that those probably inform some of your reasoning and the research that you want to undertake. So maybe you can speak to us, Sandra, and share some insights, but also feel free to contribute to the discussions where your fellow colleagues have already articulated. Sandra, if you're there, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Moses, and other speakers for giving a very detailed context. So basically, I will speak about the research into in depth at the end of my speaking. So basically, when we look at the issues that women and other vulnerable groups face in Uganda and other African countries. You realize that when we tend to look at internet shutdown, we shouldn't even start by looking that. We should start at looking at some of the issues that women face to access and use the internet. For example, like lack of skills, the domestic work that women face, that they're not able to use the internet because they have a lot to do to work at home, and then also the high cost of internet. That also deters women from using the internet. And then there's the aspect of privacy, and then the expensive ICT tools that women should be able to use to access the internet. So then when the internet is shut down, you tend to see that this is a double burden for women, because without connectivity, women are not able to access news. Women are not able to access timely information online. Women are not able to access medical information. You have all seen during the COVID-19 pandemic how internet shutdown. I mean, how the lockdown made most of the people to move online, to carry out most of the activities online. So you tend to see that women are not able to get learn and also get opportunities online, and they're also not able to speak and connect with the loved ones and also speak the truth to power. So it's true that all people are affected by internet shutdown, but as also Felisa mentioned, you realize that the vulnerable groups and the marginalized groups are mostly affected. So then you see that this tends to silence the growing population online, especially for the vulnerable group and the marginalized group. For example, in the 2020 study that WOOCNet carried on the bridging the gender digital divide in Uganda indicates that women and girls are some of the vulnerable groups or marginalized groups that are mostly affected when there's no access to the internet. And this tends to really affect the way they're supposed to express themselves online. So then when the internet is shut down, you tend to realize that women sit back and they're less likely to access or find other ways or coping strategies to access the internet. So these are some of the reasons, like surveillance. Women are fearing to be surveilled by the state, and then also the aspect that of fear of government counterattacks and also revenge. And then also realize that when connectivity is being restored, there are also other attacks that happen afterwards. Because also studies show that even though shutdowns in Uganda might primarily be used, or in other countries might primarily be used, maybe to reduce to reduce the rate of free flow of information or freedom of expression online. They are also used to as tactics to target specific groups or to surveil them. And this mostly you tend to see that there are the marginalized groups or other vulnerable groups that are in different East African countries and also in Uganda. So then you see that internet shutdown impacts on men and women differently, because women are also affected by online safety and the aspect of economic impact, because in Ugandan context, it is mostly the women who conduct businesses online, and then also the connectivity aspect. And then you tend to see that when the internet is shut down, women also fear, based on some of the results that I got from the studies, because, and then now you tend to see that women tend to depend on other people who are accessing the internet. And so this tends to lead also to misinformation online. So even though more women are trying to access the internet, ICT or internet socially constructed, so it impacts on men and women differently. So even though there are some coping strategies like VPN, which was in 2016 seen as the top 12 downloaded app to be used to circumvent internet shutdown, people should also be able to be able to take precautions of their privacy online. And then there are also other coping strategies like the use of Tor browser that intend to make sure that your communication is difficult to trace, but also to bypass online blocks. But to realize that when some of these circumvention or coping strategies are in place, there are also other governments in different countries that are trying to also think of other ways that they can also block these coping strategies. For example, in Ethiopia, we have seen in 2016 when during the anti-government protest, they tried to block the Tor and the siphon. So people were not able to access the internet. So it is very important that even though these coping strategies are in place, we should also think of that government are also thinking of ways to block these coping strategies, and what else should we do as civil societies and advocates in different parts of the world. So also, as we try to think of the coping strategies, we should also be very careful of what kind of the browser are you trying to access. For example, try to use maybe the TTPS, and then try to ensure that you have the anti-virus software installed. So this tries to then detect some of the unwanted breach of privacy that might be happening. And then also we have Felisa that is here also from Access Now. Access Now has a 24-hour toll-free line that you can reach out and also ask for ways when the internet is shut down for advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandra, for that. Thank you to all the speakers for, highlighting very interesting issues around the discussion. I believe that our audience is enjoying the discussion. Let us turn to the audience. We have received some, I think, comments or maybe questions, but let me just highlight to all the panelists so that if you have anything to say, you respond to it. I think this is like a comment. There's the comment that internet service providers are, in my own words, are in bed with government officials, and this means that when government issue directives, they have no option but to oblige. So I'd like to hear your response to that, speakers. I think there is the same comment also coming from DRC, and it also says that some of the internet service providers or telecom companies, to say, are owned by political members. So these are political actors within these within government with powers, and because of that ownership, they have to dance to the tune of the regimes or the authorities. You also have time to respond to that if you have any. And then there's also one from Muriel. Muriel says, I think she meant to say that telecom companies or telecos cannot oppose the state because I think the state has more powers over these institutions, these companies. So again, it means that it would be extremely hard for them to resist, to desist what the authorities or the regime is pushing forward as far as internet shutdown is concerned. And then there's just another comment from Benin, which is saying the internet shutdown has consequences. I think it's just a general comment that internet shutdown has consequences. But also there's a key question, I think, that has arrived, that do you think social media platforms that are blocked during internet shutdown also have a role to play in attempting to stop governments to restrict access? Let me open the floor to our speakers to briefly respond to that. And since we are also running low on our time, and then we will probably conclude. Felicia, you want to start?
Okay.
How,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. It's true that some of these ISPs have their own interests, and some government officials are involved in running these ISPs, and that is not to discourage us. Let's continue to resort to the use of the courts. If there's an order from the government, it should come through a court, and I underscore the word independence, because it's only an independent court that can analyze and weigh the options. And I don't think any independent court should rule that an internet shutdown is justified. And I'll just answer the other question. Yes, this is something we are all struggling to understand, because when you look at the losses that comes with internet shutdowns, you don't just understand why governments continue to use or resort to such drastic measures in stifling expression. And so we are going to continue raising awareness about this act of repression, continue to engage the relevant actors and stakeholders to ensure that we put an end to internet shutdowns around the world. And then also, yes, social media platforms have empowered you and I. Now you are able to write and express yourself and share what you think on social media platforms. You're able to access Facebook, WhatsApp to promote your businesses and all that. And some governments are threatened by the power that these platforms give us. And so they tend to restrict them because they are not comfortable with an empowered citizenry. And so that is why they go targeting these platforms. In conclusion, you can support the fight against internet shutdowns around the world by joining the Keep It On coalition if you're an independent CSO across the globe. If you're an individual or an individual who has experienced an internet shutdown before, and you know someone that has experienced an internet shutdown, do reach out to us, and we are happy to curate your story and use it as evidence when we are filing court cases against internet shutdowns around the globe. You can visit our website, www.accessnow.org, for more information about that. And if you are interested in knowing more about internet shutdowns, also look out for the Kill Switch podcast that was recently launched on highlighting internet shutdowns. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Sheila, you want to say something and also conclude at the same time, and the rest for Chris and Sandra thereafter.
Okay, thank you so much. So in addition to what my colleague Felicia has said, I would like to say, like I had mentioned earlier, given the fact that MTN has admitted to participating in an internet shutdown, which was a very clear indication of human rights violation by making it harder for information to flow freely in the country, and thereby restricting freedom of expression. In my opinion, MTN could have used the existing laws, or whatever telecommunication company at that time could have used the existing laws to write back to the government rejecting the endorsement. I mean, by then, the country had already signed the Access to Information Act in 2005. And I do not see why they did not use that, although sometimes, there are issues like corruption and so on that come in, but there is a possibility, since most of these companies, telecommunication companies, are multilateral sectors that I believe work internationally or regionally, and in the international system, they're supposed to be right above the state, not so much, but right above. So they have the power to use the law to refuse some of these things, to reject some of these endorsements. So although social media at times is a source of fake news, those were not justifiable legal procedures. we could expect the government, its agencies, and telecommunications to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And in less than 1 minute for both Chris and Sandra, as your comment or just your concluding remark, Sandra or
okay.
Chris?
So my concluding remarks, or also maybe a comment on some of the reasons that the government give for shutting down the internet. When you speak to some of the government officials, for example, in Uganda, they tend to say that the government or the government official, they really do not give you any reason, but they tend to say that the government official has code of ethics that they are bound to, I think, over non-disclosure acts and official secret act, that they could not really tell you the reason why the government shut down the internet, except it is maybe a court case or an internal process. So these are some of the reasons that that we need to start carrying out more studies and more conversations as digital rights activists around the likelihood or the impact of internet shutdown on different groups of people, like the women. So for me, I'm glad that I am under the global internet, the global network initiative and Internews Fellowship. I am carrying out a research under the Women of Uganda network to examine the impact of internet shutdown on women's online experience and participation in Uganda. So this is going to be like a learning resource for Uganda and other African countries and the whole world on how internet shutdown affect other groups of people. So thank you so much, Moses.
Thank you very much. And Chris, you're there. Your last remarks in less than a minute.
Okay. Well, thanks for the very interesting session. Thanks for the very interesting insights. I might address one question that was raised by the audience on the role of social media platforms that are often blocked during internet shutdowns and whether they have a role to play in stopping governments from restricting access. I think it's a bit too much. We shouldn't see the social media companies like Facebook or Twitter as solely empowering the citizen against the government, because the social companies themselves, and especially Facebook, builds its platform in such a way that certain content is prioritized over other content, and that people oftentimes certain misinformation and fake news sometimes even spreads like wildfire on its platform. So forcing some governments to respond to a certain problem. Fake news is not always like merely a justification by the government. It is definitely a problem sometimes that certain law enforcement agencies have to deal with somehow. I'm not saying that they should answer to it with an internet shutdown, and it is often used as an alibi to hide the truth from plain sight. But the social media companies have a role in containing misinformation and from spreading on their platforms as well. So to say that they should force the governments to not shut the internet down would be a bit simplistic.
Thank you very much, Chris, and I thank you, the speakers, generally, for a wonderful discussion. I would like to thank the participants to the show for making it very interactive. Like Felicia say, on behalf of the speakers, I encourage you to join the Keep It On Coalition as institutions, but also as individual members, so that we work together to address or to contribute to the fight against internet shutdowns in Uganda. On behalf of the team, my name is again Moses Oweny. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for Multilateral Affairs. I thank you very much for this wonderful session, and I look forward to seeing some of you in the other upcoming sessions. Thank you, and bye-bye to the speakers and the participants.